Hey, this is Elijah with the Oxygen team, and in this video, I'm excited to show you a pretty neat little trick that you can use on your Oxygen sites to create a simple filter that filters elements on your page based on either a search term or a checkbox. So, for instance, if we want to search for something in our lorem ipsum here, like omnis, we start typing and immediately our cards are filtered. Now, this card list is in fact a post list. These are all posts in my WordPress install. We're showing the image and title dynamically as well as the category. So we also can search for cars and it's going to show any card with cars listed as a category. But also I've added these styled checkboxes here. So I can click houses and get a filtered list of only the posts with the houses category. Boats shows me only the posts with boats, and cars, only the posts with cars. And then I can uncheck it to get the full list again. So this is not using a separate plugin. This is actually a code block up here, and it's remarkably simple to implement and incredibly fast and effective. I was really surprised when I started looking into this how well it actually works. Let's just type in something else here. Let's try delectus. And see, it's just so instantaneous, no loading, no anything. So let's jump into Oxygen and I'll show you how exactly to set something like this up. So we're going to start with a blank page here. If you already have a post list and you just want to jump to the filtering part, feel free to skip ahead. I always like to build these things on the video just so that we have a chance to kind of explore the way Oxygen works. And maybe you'll pick up something you didn't already know along the way. So we're going to drop in a section here and let's set the background color to kind of that dark purpley color that I had on the example. We'll see if we can get close. It won't be exact, but that's okay. Then we're going to drop in a repeater for our post list. Now, if you want to do this a little bit quicker, you can use easy posts instead because that's going to go ahead and output things in a prettier format right away. But if you want to do something a little more custom, then you'll probably want to use a repeater. Though you can customize the easy posts, but you have to write a bit of PHP and CSS to do that. So let's get rid of this easy post and we'll go to the repeater, drop it in. And then let's add some content to our repeater div first. So we need the title. So we need a text element for that. And let's go ahead and set the background of this div to white so that we can see what we're doing here. All right, so let's double click this text, click insert data and choose title. And then we're going to need an image for the featured image. And right now, this is just returning the page we're on. That's because we haven't set up the query yet, but we'll do that here in just a minute. So this is going to be the featured image. So we just click the data button there, choose featured image. And then let's move that above the text element there. Now, finally, we are going to need a list of categories. So let's add another text element and let's double click it, insert data, and choose categories, tags, taxonomies, choose category. And I always like to add a space separator there so that it looks prettier if there are multiple categories, though in this example there won't be. So before we go any further, let's go ahead and select our repeater here and set the query to custom post type, and that's going to be post, and that'll get us some actual results here that we can work with when we go to style. There we go. Now we've got some stuff going on. Let's go back to the primary tab here and choose grid layout. We're going to enable the grid and set it to 3 columns. And let's set the gap to 16 pixels on both of these. Now we can jump back over to the repeater div and we'll just add a class to it really quickly before we style it much, and that's going to be card. And we've got our white background color there, but let's go ahead and set some size and spacing. So we're going to do like 32 pixels of padding all the way around. And then we're going to go to borders and just set a rounded border radius. Now let's add some margin to the bottom of our image. We'll do like 8 pixels. We'll change the font size of our title to something like 22 pixels. And then we'll add some bottom margin to that as well, something like 16 pixels to move that category down. So let's save that and let's take a look on the front end to see how we're doing so far. That looks pretty good. We got our card list, our post titles, images, and categories. So this is enough for us to work with to go ahead and get our filtering functional. Now, one thing you'll want to do, because it's possible that your filter will display a number of posts, that means your section is going to reduce in height and you might have some white space, especially if you have a darker background section. You'll want to select the section that these posts are displayed in and set under size and spacing, set the minimum height to 100 VH. So that even if we're only displaying one post, you still have that full background. Okay, so now begins the coding fun. So we're going to drop in a code block, and we want that at the top of our section there. And let's start with our PHP and HTML. We actually don't need any PHP here. It's just going to be all HTML. We're just creating some form elements here. So let's get rid of this default code and let's start typing. So the first thing we need is a label for our text box, the field we're typing in to search. So we're going to say label, and then we need to make sure we say which input this label is for. So for equals $filter, because we're going to set the ID of our search box to filter. Then we'll just make it say filter items. It's going to be our title at the top, label. Close the label tag, and then now we just set up our input. So this is going to be input ID equals filter. So now our input and our label are all matched up. Type equals text. Now, since we know we want those buttons below the text input for filtering by category, let's go ahead and set those up. So this is going to be input ID equals hashtag houses, data dash search dash term equals houses. So we're going to use that in our JavaScript to make sure that the proper text is used for filtering our post elements, and then type equals checkbox. Now here's an important bit, which is putting the label after the checkbox, because we're actually going to hide the input itself, the checkbox, and just make it so that the label's visible, because clicking the label for a checkbox actually ticks the checkbox anyway, so we don't necessarily need to see it, and it looks a little bit nicer. And that's how we kind of get that button effect. So let's do label class equals inline dash checkbox. It's for equals hashtag houses. That matches those up again. And then it's going to say houses. And then close out the label tag. Now we just need to do a couple more of these. I can copy and paste these. We need one for boats and for cars. So let's paste that and change houses to boats. This is going to be boats as well. Boats here. And finally, the label text need to say boats. Let's make sure we didn't miss anything. Nope, all boats. Perfect. Now we need cars. So we just do the same thing here. Cars. And you could totally output these dynamically. You could like fetch a list of taxonomy terms and then output these checkboxes with PHP, and it would probably work just fine, but that's a bit more complicated than what I wanted to get into for this particular video. So this is going to be cars here. And actually one final thing we need to do, because we want to lay these checkboxes out in a specific way, is we need to wrap them in a div and give it a class of checkboxes. And close the div out afterwards. Perfect. Now we're going to style this up with some CSS, which is the part I enjoy a little bit more. So we'll go over to CSS and just start writing some stuff. But first, because we want to style the code block itself, I'm going to add a class to it just so that we don't have to remember the ID. We'll call it fast-filter and add that class. Now we can start doing some stuff. So we're going to do fast-filter, and we're going to give this display flex direction, column, align items, center. We're going to give it a font family of Rubik, which is a Google font I have loaded in Oxygen's global settings, and then color white, which will make everything kind of show up. So now we got the general layout that we need of the elements within that code block. Now let's style the labels. So we'll do fast filter label, font size 22 pixels, font weight maybe 600, and then margin bottom 8 pixels because we don't want it right up against the search box. Now let's style the text input. So we'll do that class again, fast-filter input. And then we can go ahead and give it all the styles that we want. So we'll do border style none, background color white, border radius 8 pixels, padding 8 pixels, beef it up a little bit in size. Font size, we want it to be big, so 32 pixels maybe. And then make sure it's 100% width. Now that messed with our checkboxes a little bit, but we'll fix those here in a second. Now let's style up our checkboxes div. So we added that checkboxes div. It had the class of checkboxes. And we're going to set its margin top to 16 pixels. And that's it for that one. Now we can use checkboxes. And then we're going to use an attribute selector. So open square bracket data dash search dash term. So if it has the attribute data dash search dash term, we don't care what the value is, but as long as the attribute's present, we want to set it to display none. There we go. And next up, we're going to do checkboxes again and labels. So we want the labels within checkbox to be styled this way. So padding 8 pixels, border radius, maybe 8 pixels there too, border 1 pixel solid white. There we go. We're getting that button look now. Margin left 8 pixels, margin right 8 pixels. Get them spaced out a little bit. Font size 16 pixels. And then we're going to text align center. Cool, that's looking pretty good. Now we just need to handle the checked state. So we want to change the label when the checkbox is checked. So we'll do checkboxes. Then we use that attribute selector again, data dash search dash term. So when a checkbox with the data dash search dash term attribute within the checkboxes div is checked, then we want to affect its immediate sibling, the sibling that immediately follows it. So we use the plus sign and then the selector for that sibling, which is label. And let's set those labels to a different background color. Let's do background color 58D, 68D. That should be that green color from the initial demo. And then same for the border. Border 1 pixel solid, and then that same color here. Whoops, let's put it up here. Perfect. So let's apply that. Let's save it. And let's just make sure that our checked state is working like we want it to. So if we click one of these, you can see it now changes the color of the label. Now note that these are checkboxes, so multiple can be checked at a time. We don't want that, so we're going to make some adjustments with JavaScript to change that behavior. But before we jump into the JavaScript, we want to add some space below our code block here. So we can actually do that right in Oxygen's properties pane. We'll just add like 128 pixels below it. Actually, that may be a bit much. Let's do like 90 and save that. And then let's also set this to 100% width. That's going to be way too big. So let's set a max width of 768 pixels. And then let's center everything in this div. And then select our card and make sure it's all aligned left. Okay, that looks much better. Now we can select the code block and jump into the JavaScript. So before we get started, full credit to css-tricks.com, which is where I saw this little bit of JavaScript to create a filter. So that kind of gave me the foundation, and then I expanded upon it a little bit to add the checkbox functionality. Now, the first thing we're going to do is create a new jQuery selector, which is maybe something you haven't seen done before, but it's actually pretty easy to do. So the reason we're doing this is we want to use the :contain selector, which allows us to only select elements that contain a specific string. But the problem with :contains is that it's case sensitive, which we don't want here. So instead of trying to shoehorn that into working like we want it to, we can create a new selector. So the way we do that is we do jQuery.expr. We're going to add some square brackets here and a colon within quotes. And then we're going to add our selector here. And this is going to be called CI contains. And that is going to equal jQuery.expr.create pseudo. And we're going to do a function inside that, arg, and then open curly brace, return function lm, open curly brace, return jQuery lm dot text dot to uppercase dot index of arg dot to uppercase. So we're basically just trying to match these strings together at this point. And we're making sure everything is case insensitive with all of these extra functions. And then greater than or equal to 0. And then we just close everything out. So that actually creates a new selector. So we can do jQuery card : CI contains as a selector now, which we will do here in a minute. But first, let's go ahead and set up some other stuff. So we need to listen for key up event when we're typing in the filter text input. So we're going to do jQuery #filter dot key up and run a function within that. Var cur underscore text equals jQuery this dot value. So we're setting the current text variable to the value of the text input. And then we're going to run a function called filter results. And we're going to pass the cur underscore text variable to that. Now that function doesn't exist yet. We'll write that here in a moment. And actually, since the checkboxes are a little more involved, let's go ahead and write that filter results function. So we're going to say function filter results. It gets passed cur underscore text. And here's how it works. It says jQuery, and we pass a selector to it. So in this case, it's card.hide. So we're hiding all cards when there's a key up event within the filter input. And then we're going to do jQuery card, and then we're going to use that new selector we created called CI contains. And then we need to pass some stuff to that. We're going to escape our quotes here and concatenate the cur text variable into that. And then once that's all selected, we do show. So let's apply, see if we get any errors or anything. jQuery expression contains not a function. That's because we're not in a document ready function here, but it should work on the front end. Let's take a look. Check for console errors, as we always want to do when we're writing JavaScript. And probably this is a typo here. It definitely is. I got the E and the U mixed up in the sudo, so let's go back here. Yep. That is a type of thing that tends to happen sometimes when you're writing code. So let's refresh again. Should have no console errors here. Console, nothing. Now our actual typing search should work. So if we type omnis, you can see it's now filtering. So if that's all you wanted, then you're pretty much done at this point. But if you want to add the checkboxes, we'll dive into that as well. So let's jump back over to Oxygen and let's add the functionality for those checkbox buttons. So we're going to look for the change event on these checkboxes. So let's do jQuery fast-filter input type equals checkbox. So this selects all the checkboxes within the fast filter code block. And then we're going to do on change, run a function. Now we need to store the ID of the checkbox that changed. So we're going to do var this ID equals jQuery this dot attr ID. This is important because we only want to have one of these checkboxes checked at a time. And to that effect, we'll do this bit, which is jQuery fast filter input type equals checkbox, same selector we used up top, dot each function. So whenever one of the checkbox changes, we're going to run this bit on each of the checkbox, and we're going to check if the jQuery.this.attr ID does not equal the value we stored in that this ID variable, so this ID, then we're going to uncheck it. So jQuery this.prop checked false. So we're just setting the checked property to false on all the checkboxes that don't match the ID of the one that actually changed. Now we do our filtering bit down here. So if jQuery this dot is, and we're checking for the checked state, then we're going to do some stuff, and we're going to set the variable cur text to jQuery this data search term. That's that special HTML attribute we added, data-search-term, which holds the actual text we want to search for when we check one of these boxes. Then we run the filter results function and pass that cur text variable. So it's essentially doing the same thing as typing in the text input, but we're just triggering it based off of a checkbox instead. Then we do else and set the filter results function to run with no search term. This is so when we uncheck everything, we get all of our posts back. So let's apply that code, no errors in the builder, jump up to the front end and see if everything works. So first we saw that searching, so let's search for labore. This works like we want it to. We can also search for cars because it's a string within the element that we're filtering. It works fine. Boats. But if we want to filter by checking something or ticking one of these buttons, we click it and it doesn't work. And again, when you're coding, typos happen all the time. So let's inspect console, and looky there, we typed jQuery wrong because it is case sensitive. So let's go find where we screwed that up and fix that real quick. jQuery, there we go. Let's save and try again. Now the magic moment really is going to happen when we click houses. And now we get all the posts with the houses category that's output in the card. So we can click between these. We can only have one checked at a time, which is cool. It kind of makes it act as kind of a radio button. But when we uncheck one of these filter options, then all of our posts come back and then we can search for specific strings. So there are a ton of applications where this is really useful and could really give your users a great experience. Now, a couple of things to be mindful of. This isn't actually real WordPress filtering, so the query is not changing. So if you have a ton of posts, say you have like 1,000 posts, I probably wouldn't use this type of filtering because you still need to query all of those posts. Whereas with WordPress filtering, you can actually filter the number of posts that are returned. This is actually just filtering the HTML elements on the page. So all of your posts need to be output. And then the filtering will work on whatever HTML is on the page where the filter is set up. Similarly, it doesn't really work that well with paginated content because it's not going to filter anything that's on the second page or any page you're not on. It only works on things that are actually visible on the current page. So with those limitations in mind, I hope this is helpful for you. That's how to set up a really simple jQuery-based filtering functionality for a list of posts or anything else you might have on a page. Again, this is Elijah with the Oxygen team, and thank you very much for watching.